Hello and welcome to Gimpy Bytes, the only place on the internet where gaming and
This
accessibility uh, come to one fine point on this FaceTime continuum. I'm Captain Gimpy and I have no idea what episode this is, and this is.
the Zen Burrow, yeah.
And he doesn't know what episode this is.
No.
So today we're going to talk about simulation sickness. Well, he's going to talk about simulation sickness, but
Yeah.
a lot of people know people who have motion sickness. There are conflicting theories as to why motion sickness in general happens. The most common theory is that it's because your eyes and the mechanisms responsible in your inner ear for equilibrium balancing are sending conflicting signals, making you nauseous and fatigued and vomiting and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
And there's an idea that it might have evolved out of a response to protect us from poison, but I don't really know about that. But what we do know is it's because your brain is receiving conflicting inputs and it's not being processed right. For example, like when you're on a boat and you feel motion because you're on the sea, you might be in a boat with no windows. So your eye is saying everything is still. All your visual centers are like, "Oh, you're not moving," but your body says, "Yes, I'm moving." So you just go, and
Yeah.
so usually people who get motion sickness also get simulation sickness, but also there are a great number of people in certain situations who do not get motion sickness normally who get sick when playing VR, and Zenbro is going to tell you about that while I drink coffee on camera.
Yeah. By the way, he's pretty immune to any type of balance sickness from what I've seen.
Yeah, it just doesn't happen, and I have a theory about that.
Yeah, but we'll go into that later. So I suffer from migraines regularly, and without going too deep into it, there is some link between dizziness and migraines and motion sickness and migraines. Um, I typically don't get any type of balance sickness when I'm just normal, but during a migraine, I start suffering not only light sensitivity, but also there are times where I get nausea. So, an example is where I was playing Battlefield 3, the single player campaign, and I was already suffering a migraine, but I was stupid and like, oh, I could handle this. There was a part where the mission opens up. Shut up. The mission opens up in a jet, in first person view in a cockpit, and I was like, oh shit, wow, this guy's out there, and mind you, I was kind of glued to the screen, so it was like my brain was like, oh, you're in the game, and I was like, oh, and he was in the other room, and I said, dude,
No, actually, we were both in here.
yeah, I was like, I'm getting a little too. This looks too real to me.
And then I was like, "What do you mean? It looks too real." And you're like, "Oh, it's too real." Oh! And then you ran to the bathroom.
Yeah, and then I was like, I think I should stop.
By the way, I shouldn't laugh because my brother had this happen to him too. He also does not get motion sick, but I have a theory about that too.
Yeah, so I ended up playing Super Mario World to return to reality.
So here's the thing, right? So me, I don't really get motion sick, and I have a theory why. I'm like completely immune to motion sickness. And the times I have thrown up because I've been on like a roller coaster or something were because I was an idiot and ate right before I went on, which is a completely different thing because your stomach muscles are contracting because of the G forces and shit, and it's pushing on your stomach, so you throw up because of physical force, not because your brain is being played a trick. But I have CP, and that basically means like I had a stroke when I was a kid. That's basically the only difference between CP and stroke, is that CP, like people who have CP because of brain hemorrhage had it when they were babies and not when they were adults. In my case, there's also oxygen deprivation, but the symptoms usually manifest slightly differently. So in my case, I think part of the brain damage that I have is in that system because like there's sometimes I can't like automatically self correct for the direction of a force. Like if you're making a sharp turn, like I'm not really good at the whole self correcting thing, so I kind of have to hold on to things. And I also think that that's why I don't get motion sickness. And as far as I know, I probably won't get motion sick or simulation sickness either. But if anybody wants to test that theory, I'd be more than willing to like sit with VR things on my face and see what happens. So
yeah.
here's the other thing I want to talk about. Weed is legal here, okay? So sometimes I do that. Well, okay, like pretty much every day.
Same here.
But it helps with like actually I have a recommendation. It helps with depression and all that good stuff. It's actually been working out really well. So I've been happier even when I'm not medicated. So just in case you're curious. But sometimes when I'm watching stuff in that chemically induced state, things will seem like hyper real to me and they'll kind of freak me out. But the way that I've learned to work around that when playing video games is that I focus on the frame around the image like that my monitor creates. So then it keeps me focused on, oh, this isn't real and like none of this is happening and I'm just playing a game. So I have a suspicion that certain parts of the endocannabinoid system are linked to the vestibular system, and they're definitely linked to the the ocular system in the brain because your pupils dilate.
Yep.
Which is why they used to prescribe it for glaucoma patients when they were doing federal test runs, because it releases that eye pressure, your pupils dilate, and yeah. So.
Yeah. With the simulation sickness and VR, an added thing that, from what I've read, is it's something called postural instability, and it's where, let's say, you're playing a VR game where you're in the cockpit of a spaceship or jet,
but you physically are standing.
But you're physically standing up, even though you should be sitting down.
And so your brain and your body think, oh, I should be sitting down, and then I'm not. So like when you're moving, I think this also plays into the whole what was that term? Something convergence. Damn. It's that thing where your eye has difficulty with VR equipment because your brain knows that there's something right in front of your eyes, but you're seeing things off in the distance because of the simulation.
Right.
That does have to do with it actually, because that's one of the chief causes of motion sickness. So so they've also found that with people who get motion sickness, drugs that suppress eye movement also help treat motion sickness. And again, it's because of the whole conflicting signals. So, like, if you're standing,
right,
and you're supposed to be sitting in a cockpit, your body sort of assumes that you're going to be going into the motion that you're seeing, but you're not.
You're not actually moving in that direction in reality.
Which is why, from what you were telling me, they recommend that if you're doing a flight sim, you should just sit in a chair and not move.
Yeah, just chill out. Play the game.
Which, if you've ever played, like, because I grew up in the tail end of the arcade era, right? Like, and when they used to do like these flight games, you would sit in a cockpit. You're not like standing at a cabinet. You're usually sitting down.
Yeah. Also, another thing I've read, which VR companies are testing for, is latency issues when playing a game.
Oh yeah.
So if you had to choose between making hyper-realistic graphics versus
low latency,
you would go for the low latency, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because that latency will screw up your.
You're saying bad words a lot.
Excuse me. That latency issue will screw up your brain's perception of what it's seeing and what you're doing. Because if you're, let's say, you're in the cockpit, all right, and you're shooting some stuff, if something happens to where it freezes for a little bit,
Right.
It'll be jarring.
So, for those of you who have never heard the word latency, because it's usually a networking term, right? But we're starting to think about it and apply it to other things. When I first heard latency, I learned it when I was learning, network admin type things. So latency is the amount of time it takes to transmit data. And why that applies here is because our brains are wired for one-to-one tracking. So we move, our brains and eyes and our bodies track that on a one-to-one rate. So if you have a latency problem with your VR sim, which means basically, so the player makes a motion,
Yep.
and there's like a greater than 10 millisecond, it's millisecond, 10 millisecond lag between the time the player makes the motion and the motion begins to happen in the headset.
Mm-hmm.
That might produce, that might tell parts of the brain that this shit, like, it's not really happening, but the rest of you thinks it is, so then you might, barf and stuff.
Right.
Which is why there's a debate. Should we go photorealistic or should we work on low latency simulation first? And as the hardware gets better, we can focus on putting in more realistic visuals. From what I've seen, to give you guys a visual benchmark, visually speaking, it only takes graphics that are about as good as Half-Life 2 on its maximum settings for your brain to have a believable response to the VR simulation, which is not very hard to produce on current hardware. It's actually really, really easy. You can still do that with a dual-core CPU playing like Counter-Strike. That being said, the reason why it takes so much more power to run VR is because you're running simultaneous graphics computations for two independent displays that are supposed to run in sync with each other, and then your CPU has to do all the crunching for the physics and all that stuff, so that all that stuff runs in sync with the GPUs that are running simultaneously, one for each eye. Or,
Yeah.
that sounded really nerdy.
Well, I think people will understand.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So that's motion sickness, and that's how simulation sickness and motion sickness are related. This is still being studied and researched so that we can figure out how to reduce the occurrence of simulation sickness in otherwise healthy human beings.
Yep.
Why are we talking about this? Because obviously VR is probably not going to go away this time. I've said that before. It's probably just going to take a while to hit the non-early adopter market and make it into the hands of everyday consumers. But it will happen. I mean, graphics cards are ridiculously cheap. CPUs capable of doing all your physicsy things are super, super cheap. I mean, I have one and I bought this for like $60 on sale, so...
Yeah.
I mean, come on. I need a new graphics card. If anybody wants to buy me a graphics card so I can play VR games, and you want to buy me a VR rig, thank you. Because I will not leave the house. But I think that's our episode for today.
Yeah. So VR simulation sickness, very very real thing.
I actually did an individual video last week about treating, eliciting a psychologically positive experience or negative experience and studying the results of how people react outside of the simulation when exposed to those experiences within a simulation. And I'd actually like to do another video about that and its potential in the future. Just a note, I'm probably going to talk about psychedelics and the effects on the brain in that episode. And because back in the day, we tried using psychedelics as antidepressants,
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot to say about that. That's probably going to be another video. It's probably not even going to be a Gimpy Bytes episode.
And little trivia, Albert Hoffman, the guy who accidentally discovered LSD, was actually trying to find a cure for migraines and cluster headaches.
A brilliant chemist. The last time I saw an interview with him, he said he still used it about monthly for himself.
And he was very adamant that it's a very powerful drug that shouldn't be trifled with.
And he said that, for healthy people, there's no problem with using it in the right circumstances.
Yeah.
The problem with any substance is abuse. Just telling you, a little bit of alcohol actually does you some good. It's when you drink too much and you drown your liver in it that it becomes really unhealthy.
Yeah, so we have a lot to say on stuff like that.
But I really think that where VR could go, it could help treat a lot of psychological problems such as depression. What else?
Depression. What about anxiety?
Oh, he did too. Yeah, definitely. For example, you could do a lot with exposure therapy using VR for people that have extreme difficulty doing things like taking elevators or finding themselves in new social situations. With the help of a good VR simulation and a qualified therapist, you could probably help a lot of people overcome a lot of emotional difficulties.
Yeah.
And we could even begin to cultivate purposefully the faculty of empathy in human beings. And I know some people don't think that empathy and compassion are the same, but they are. You just have to learn to combine the two. Anyway, that's for like one of my weird hippie videos. See you guys next time.